Okay, good morning. Continuing Ayin Beis, its conclusion. We are on the top of page in volume 3, top of page 1436. And we're learning here, as I gave yesterday a longer introduction, going deeper into Krishma, Shema, that we say, the Neshama below says Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. And then the continuation, Baruch Shem, V'ahavta, all of it includes 248 words, corresponding to the 248 organs of the king, similar to what it says about mitzvahs. Why? Malchus, the king, is Zah. Malchus Kaddish is called the holy king. And the Ivarim the Malchus is like a person is made up. His very limbs and organs are part of his very essence, part of his guf. Umuhusa v'adam. Kamoi kein Ivarim de Zah, guf umuhusa de Zah. So bottom line is that through Shema, as we're going to learn, we connect to the Melech himself. Like we learned earlier, Malachim, we learned yesterday, they only reach the Chitzeni as the outer expression. That's why their service is through song and through praises. That's like someone who's not in the presence of the king, so therefore they can describe and praise him, so to speak, from a distance. But someone who's b'fnim b'beis HaMelech and is seeing with his own eyes and experiencing the king himself can't even talk about it. He's completely absorbed in the very experience itself. It's only afterwards that he can speak about and praise him. And that's what the Malachim do. So the Malachim have more of an outer experience. They describe so-called God's glory, and that's why they say Kodesh. Where is his place? They speak from a different, because they're removed. Yisrael, on the other hand, are called Kadeshim. Kodesh. Could be called Kadeshim. Hisim Kadeshim. Kodesh Yisrael. Ki am Kodesh Atoh. Because that's where we're rooted. We're rooted like a child rooted in the very essence of his father. We're rooted Moker Chetzvam. And that's why when we get stimulated and excited in Shema, we're connecting directly with the king himself. However, as we explained, and we shall explain, because the neshamas come down below, they need siyua, they need to support the malachim to get them going, to ignite and stimulate. But ultimately, they will connect to a deeper level of the divine that malachim do. So just like we talked about the digestive system, it's the food that sustains you, but the digestive system is what distributes and breaks down the food, that it could become nutrients that become part of your blood. So it's not that the digestive system is deeper than the food itself, but it's necessary to be able to integrate it. But ultimately, like you said here, neshamas connect directly to the highest levels. And they do so primarily through Shema, Krishma. Krishma, as we shall learn soon, encompasses all the mitzvahs. And now to explain it, he says, let's explain it with the Ramach Pikudin, the 248 positive mitzvahs, correspond to the 200 Evarim, like I explained yesterday. When we do a mitzvah, we're essentially aligning ourselves to the mitzvah, with a different part of your body that you're doing it with, is aligning itself, so to speak, to the corresponding spiritual counterpart of that particular Aver in the king. The idea mitzvahs who? Through mitzvahs, we create a yichud of Kudsha, Brich, and Shchinta. Now, we're going to continue from the top of page 1436, but I decided, especially in context of the bigger picture, I'm going to do more of a summary of the next few pages and not learn it all inside, especially relying on that fact I taught it already back a few years ago when we learned it. And but the summary is essentially with the next few pages, all the way till page 1441. He speaks about what is Kudsha, Brich, and Shchinta. The fact that we unite two levels of the divine, the transcendent divine, and the divine as it manifests in existence, which is a central theme in Ayin Beis. So I'm not in any way saying that the next few pages are not critical, but I don't feel the need to go through it again because it's quite dense. There's a lot of levels. So I decided let's just do a summary of different ways he explains Kudsha, Bricha, and Shechina. What is it referring to? And all that is going to come to explain what mitzvahs accomplish, and that in turn will explain what Krishma, Shema, the Krishma, which also is comprised of 248 words, what it accomplishes. Essentially creating the Hashem Echad, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, which in a way Hashem Elokeinu and Hashem Echad is like Yuchud Kudsha Bricha V'Shchinta, as he will explain in broader terms. So let's go over, I'm going to go over it more in a summarized version. Right now I'm going to summarize pages 1436 through 1441, the next 5 pages, without reading it all, just we'll go through section by section, the different ways he explains Kudsha Bricha and Shchinta. Before I continue, if there are any questions, I'll be happy to take any questions, and we can, yeah. Now, keep in mind.
Why shouldn't you go inside?
Because I already taught it, the whole thing in detail, and I don't want to do it again. There's no need. I don't see a need to do it. If someone wants to learn it inside, just go to those recordings. The reason we're going over a second time is because I wanted to bring it into the bigger picture with Hamagbia L'Sheves to understand the end of the Hemshech. But I did learn it. We already finished Ayin Beis, if you recall. It's just I wanted to go back because there are a lot of questions that weren't answered, themes that weren't finished, and also the bigger picture. Just I think is the right judgment call in this context. Again, anyone interested? It's all there. I learned through this in detail. So the general picture is like this. He says, V'yadua, top of page 1436, Sheyesh b'chinas Kudsha Bricha v'Shchinta adrei ma'mailas. The levels of Kudsha Bricha and Shchinta exist all the way to the highest levels. In other words, Kudsha Bricha and Shchinta are general terms that refer to 2 levels of the divine, and in different places mean different levels. Like just like when we say, for example, Chochma and Bina and Das, and Chesed Gvura Teferes, when you say that, it could be in Atzilus, it could be in Bria, it could be in Yetzirah, it could be in Asiyah, it could be in the 10 hidden spheres. Or in general, when you say name of Havaya or other names, we've learned that the name can be in Atzilus, and then B'Sharshe, it's higher than Atzilus, and B'Sheder Sharshe is all the way higher before the Tzimtzum. So Kudsha Bricha Shchinta is a very general term, 2 general levels. Like we say, Sevav Kalaman and Mamala Kalaman. The Sevav Mamala in Atzilus, the Sevav Mamala in Bria, the Sevav Mamala in Chochma, Sevav Mamala in Bina. Essentially, it means Makif and Primi, 2 general divine levels. Now, keep in mind, Kudsha Bricha has the word Kodesh in it. HaKodesh Baruch Hu, Kudsha Bricha, Kudsha Brichu, which we learned is Kodesh. Shechina is like from the word V'shachanti B'seicham, which means it's how the divine manifests. So Kudsha Bricha refers to a level that's higher than manifestation, like a transcendent level, and Shechina refers to the divine as it manifests. And we're going to learn that mitzvahs and then Shema create a yichud between all the levels of Kudsha Bricha and Shechinta, from the lowest levels to the highest levels. So the first thing he says, that the 2 levels is, in Atzilus, what is Kudsha Bricha and Shechina? Zah and Malchus. Remember we learned before Zah and Malchus? So Zah is like the Mashpia, and Malchus is the Makabel. We spoke about it in the previous page as well, if you recall, when he spoke about Be'er Havaya. You basically Yaakov L'chuv v'nalcha Be'er Havaya, that Er Havaya, Havaya is Zah, and Er Havaya is the Amshach of Chochma and Bina into Zah. So Zah and Malchus is Kudsha Bricha v'Shchinta. Malchus is called Shechina, like he said, Al Shem Sheshechenes B'Tachtenim. That means it's being manifest. It's the divine as it manifests in, ultimately, from Malchus into Bria. Like we recall that when we talked about the Malachim, we said that Malchus in Atzilus is still a level of Ein Sof. It has to go through a parsa, partition, and has to be mislabish and matat, and that's what turns it into a manifest level. And then he says Malchus, not just in Bria, but also in Atzilus, is also the level of Shechina.
What's mislabish and matat?
Excuse me?
What's mislabish and matat? I'm blank.
Malchus.
No, but what does that mean to be mislabish and matat?
We learned it earlier. He spoke about it back on page, go back to page, bottom of page 1428. Matat is a level, is a malach, is a level that is, we call the nal. It's like a filter. It's a garment. That Malchus is mislabishin. Yeah.
Matat is not the angel that's in charge of all the angels?
Matat is an angel that is in charge of angels, yes.
So how is Malchus mislabish? I'm sorry, I know you taught it before, but
It just is mislabish. That's what it says. It says Malchus is mislabish and matat. Here,
and not Zah?
Not Zah, Malchus. Malchus is what carries it into Biyah. Zah is higher than Malchus. If you look 6-7 lines from the bottom of page 1428, he says, Malchus b'matat. That's connected to the bringing the energy of Atzilus into Biyah, into Bria, and then Yitzir Nasib.
Oh, through the Malachim.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
Okay. Now he says, so Shechina is Malchus, not just Chitzenius Malchus in Biyah, but also Malchus, Pnimius Malchus in Atzilus. Like I said, I'm summing up what he's saying here, but I'm not going to read every line. It's going to take a lot of time. And as I said, I'd rather focus on the bigger picture here. Okay. So the way it works, like we learned earlier, if you talk in terms of ishtalshelus, so just like we say for a person's behavior, Malchus would be implementing. It's the final sphere that draws down your moichin, your intelligence, your midas, your emotions, your behavioral faculties, netzach chayd yesod. Malchus implements it. So Malchus on its own has nothing of its own, but it carries, as we spoke earlier at length with Ma'aseh Tachtenim, it's like the potter's wheel that serves as a type of interface between, just like your faculties that are within you, Malchus serves as the bridge between you and another. That's why Malchus is connected to Dibur very often. So in this context, Kudsha Bricha would be the Elokus, like the midas of Elokus, which is Zah, and Malchus is as it manifests Shechenes v'Shachanti the Shechina. So essentially, so basically Zah is mamshich into Primius Malchus and Primius Malchus into Chitzenius Malchus. And Zah is called Kudsha Brichu, which is Kodesh Umuvdal. That's why it's Kudsha Brichu. It's removed. Malchus is not removed. When you say V'Shachanti, when you say Shechenes, B'Tachtenim, it's manifesting. It's present. That's what the Shechina means. Kudsha Brichu is referring to Elokus that's higher and removed somewhat, Kodesh Umuvdal. Like we learned earlier that the midas of Zah is a level of Ein Sof. So you can follow along what I'm saying, but I say I'm just selecting certain sections here. So that's one interpretation of Kudsha Bricha and Shechinta, and the yichud that is created. So when you do a mitzvah, you're taking, we say, Asher Kedeshanu v'mitzvaysu v'tzivanu, you're taking Kudsha Brichu, you're drawing down God, the transcendent divine, manifesting it through the mitzvah into something actual. Then on a higher level, what's Kudsha Bricha and Shechina? He says, Kamoyken Chub, Nikra Bina b'Shem Shechinta. Chochma and Bina are also Kudsha Bricha and Shechina. Bina is called Shechinta Ilah, the higher level of Shechina. Why? Because al shem shemeshachenes gimel reshenes bezayin tachtenes. Because it takes Keser, Chochma, and Bina, and it manifests it into the Zayin Tachtenis, into the 7 lower midas, meaning Zah and Malchus into the lower levels. So Bina is called Shechina. That's the Harihu Bechinis is Slapshus B'Zah. So on a higher level, Kudsha, Brich, and Shechina is going to be Chochma and Bina. And Chochma Bechinis Kodesh Shalamayla Bechinis Moker Mamish. So Zah, Bina rather, like Ema Bonim Smecha, Bina serves as the mother that gives birth to the Mides, and Chochma, like the father, is removed somewhat. That's why it's called Kodesh, Kudsha Brichu. Shalamayla Bechinis Moker Mamish. Kadesh, Kodesh, Kadesh Mila Begarmei. It's a word of its own because it's separate. When you say Kodesh with a vav, Kodesh means you're being mamshech the Kedusha. You're drawing it down. Kadesh Mila Begarmei, or Kodesh, not Kodesh, but Kodesh or Kadesh, without a vav.
Kodesh Milo Begarmei, without a vav.
Without a vav, Mila Begarmei. So now we have already 2 levels of Kudsha B'Chir Shechina, Zah and Malchus, and Chochma and Bina. But now he goes further. He's going to take it even higher. Ula Maila, Ula Gabela Maila Matzilus. This is all in Atzilus itself. So Chochma compared to Bina is Kodesh, Kodesh Mila Begameh. Ula Gabela Maila Matzilus, Hariya Chochma Bechinis Reishis Agili. But when you compare it to higher than Atzilus, even Chochma is the beginning of a Gili. It's already a spark. Something is the beginning of consciousness, the beginning of Atzilus. And then what is Kodesh? Hu b'chinas ha-keser, she-kodesh hu-muvdal meishtalshlus. So then the Kodesh Kudsha Brichu then is referring to Keser that's removed from Sishtalshlus. So now we have a third interpretation. That Keser is Kudsha Brichu. So already 3 levels of Kudsha Brichu and Shchinta. Interestingly, if you learn the Maimer Basa Legani, which is now Yud Shvat is coming Shabbos, Basa Legani, he says Ikar Shchina B'Tachtenim. In the first Maimer Basa Legani Tov Shiral, the Rebbe elaborates what level is Shchina, and he talks about these levels. It's based somewhat on what we're learning here. That Shchina could be Malchus, it could be like we said now, it could be Bina, and now it could even be Chochma because Kesed is Kudsha Brichu. He doesn't say explicitly that, but that's what he's saying here. So Kesed is Kodesh Shemov L'Mishtalshlus. Okay, so 3 ways to explain Kudsha Brichu v'Shchinta. Not finished yet. And now he says, like we see, that when you talk about Ukamoi, Shemetzinu B'Inyan Shem Nechach V'Nister. He's going to explain it now with the 2 expressions when we speak about God, or we speak in general, we say Nechach is the word Atoh. In Hebrew, Atoh means you. When I say you, it means you're my presence. That's why I'm saying you. When I say who, in Hebrew, who means him. Means it's not me. He's saying he. In the third person means he's not right there in front of me. That's called Lashon Nister. So in Hebrew, 2 expressions, Atoh, Lashon Nechach means you say you when you see something before you, meaning it's revealed. That would be like Shechina, as we'll learn. And who, a Kodesh Baruch Hu, you say a Kodesh Baruch Hu, Kudsha Brichu, is who referring to a level that's transcendent and beyond, Kodesh Muvdal. And in that itself, we just learned that there are 3 levels in that. So he's going to explain now Atoh and who. To explain Kudsha Brichu. You don't say Kudsha Brich Atoh, you say Kudsha Brichu. The Yedua. I'm going to read a few lines here. Shenechach kamay Atoh. Like when you say you. Moira al madrega sagilui. Hu b'chinas mamala kalam. That's a level of gili. When you say you, means something is revealed. I see it. You are here in my presence. That's the level of mamala kalam. That's the level of the divine that comes revealed to radiate, to illuminate, to radiate, and to sustain the world's existence. Ukamayim antu da fikon eser tikunin da fikas behelim elagili vulan hoge behun almen. He's talking about the eser tikunin, the 10 spheres, the revealed spheres. They came from a concealed state to a revealed state in order to manage the affairs of existence. To manage, to direct, to watch over. The word Atoh, you, because it's the level of Gili, okay, in the parentheses, he explains that Atoh is also the letters Ve'Atoh, as the letters Aleph to Tov, which is all the whole letter, the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Ma'alav Atov, and the Vov is the Oyer V'Achayis that shows on the Hamshacha and the Gili, the Hamshacha Sarkav. That's Noichach. What about Nister? When you say who, V'Nister, who, like when you say who, him, not you. Moira ala madrega hanesteres. That indicates on a level that's hidden and concealed. You bring K'mashakaza b'sid b'pirish baruch hu. When you say baruch hu. V'hainu b'chinas sevav kalam. So in contrast to mamala kalam, which is the divine as it's present within existence, and you sense it, sevav kalam is who? That gamshu gamke machaya. Even though sevav kalam also is a force that sustains and energizes existence. And Adarab is the Ikar Achayis, Makom Mokim Harizebehelim. But it's in a removed way, it's concealed. Like he says in Tanya, Perik Memches, that's why it's called Makif, Sevav, not because it surrounds, because it's removed from. V'zeu shenikra v'kumayahu u'shmoi. And that's the level of who, like when we say who, v'shmoi. Who is Lashon Nister, Shmoi is already a Gili. Like we learned earlier in a number of discourses, a number of places, that's the level, who and Shmoi is the level of Helam and Gili. Okay. So far, so good. Any questions?
I understood differently than, so it said the different lines like Zan Malchus, Chochma and Bina, and Kesser and Shtalshalos. And you said Kesser versus Chochma, but isn't it all the spheres? Kesser versus the entire?
He doesn't say explicitly, he just says that Chochma is Reishis Hagilui.
But the same way. He
doesn't say explicitly that the Shechina is Chochma, he doesn't say the Shechina is the spheres, he just says the Kudsha Brichu, the Kodesh, is Kesser. He doesn't spell out what Shechina is in that context.
But the analogy,
you can interpret as you like, as you see fit.
Yeah, because if you look at the other two, the analogy is the same. So it would be, for me, it would be.
Since he doesn't say it explicitly, I didn't say it explicitly either. So
His look in other not places. Explicit to all 10 spheres?
Not necessarily. It's probably most likely Kesser and Chochma, but I would have to see if other Maimorim what they say about this. But regardless, it's three. He definitely says three things on Kudsha Brichu. So Kodesh is either Zah or Chochma or Kesser. Shechina, he does say explicitly, is Malchus or Bina. He just doesn't spell out what the Shechina is in the third level. Yeah. Okay. Now we go even higher. He's going to go further. Oh, I don't know if he's going to go further. Let's see where he goes with this. We're not finished yet. So now we continue. He now brings from a Idra Zuta, a Zayar. That's why Chochma is called Atoh. Ki Atoh Avinu. So Avinu is always Abba, the father. Chochma and Bina is Abba v'Ima. So Atoh Avinu refers to Chochma as Atoh. The Fisha Chochma, Hireshis Agili, like you said before, because Chochma is the beginning of the revelation. So even though compared to Bina, when you talk about Chochma and Bina, not compared to higher than Atzilus. Chochma is like Kudsha Brichu, Kodesh Mila Begarmei. and Bina would be Shchinte law, like he said. But compared to higher than Atzilus, Chochma is already the beginning of Gilui. Ubchinas HaKeser Nikrahu. And Keser would be called the level of who? Lashon Nister Lefishu Sosam Vanilla, because it's closed and concealed. How he qualifies this? Because the fact is, we also find at times that Bina is called who. Now we said Keser is called who. But there are times we find, and we spoke about this at length in the beginning of volume 2 in Ayin Beis, and I believe also earlier, when he spoke about Bina, he spoke about Bina being who? I just want to find it 1 second. I think it was, by B'chol Meidech, 1 second, here. I think on page 1411, who? Nashanista Shubina, and then he said even higher, it's Malchus Tima in Keser. So here again, you're going to see everything is relative. So he says, "V'hadi metzinu shagama bina datzilu shilamat machachma nikrahu." Don't we find that bina, which is lower than chochma, you called chochma atoh compared to the hu of keser, the nister and concealed of keser. But at times we find that bina, which is lower than chochma, is called hu, like he says in Zohar a number of places, and then chesed is called atoh. Like he said before, that Bina would be, in this context, Chochma Bina would be like Kudsha Brichu, and Zah. 1 second, let me just see. Bina. So this context, and Zah would be called Chesed, is called Atoh. Atoh Kohen La'elam, Ela Inyan. So he answers, well, it's a question, it's a qualification. The Ian is that it's all relative. Lefisha zun, compared to Zon Malchus, Nikra Bina Alma Diskasia. You're talking about Zon Malchus, then Bina is called the hidden worlds. That's why Bina Ke Nikra Bina Hu. But if you talk compared to higher levels, Nikra Gama Chochma Shalamayla Bina Ata. Even Chochma that's higher than Bina is called Ata. And then who refers to keser, which is a hidden level, like we say, Chochma ma'ayin timotza. Chochma comes from ayin. Ayin is a concealed level. Ayin means what? It's a mystery. It's a what? So this is a very fundamental piece in Chassidus in general, that things are relative. I mean, the best example, a good example for this is if someone asks you, what does the horizon look like? So it depends where you're standing. If you're standing in a valley, you're going to say one answer. If you're standing on a plateau, you're going to say a second answer. If you're 10 feet up on a mountain, you'll say a third answer. And if you're on top peak, at the peak of the mountain, you'll give a fourth answer. And someone will say, which one is it? The answer is all relative. The same thing in knowledge. When you say, I understand an idea, and there's some things that are above my head that I didn't get yet. And then time passes, and you'll say, well, now I already understand those ideas that were once above my head. So it's a normal process of growth in every possible way, whether it's the horizons, whether it's intelligence, whether it's Avodas Hashem even. That everything is relative. What today is revealed to you, what today is concealed, tomorrow could be revealed. And then the concealment is a higher level. So what he's saying here is not a contradiction. It's not saying there are three different interpretations in Kudsha, Brich, and Shchinte. It's saying that in all levels, there's always a level. Compared to a lower level, the higher level is hidden. Compared to a higher level, it's a revealed state. That's what he wants to explain here, which is really explains the whole Aveda through Seder Ishtalsus. We talked many times. All these levels we talk about. Asiya, Yitzira, Bria. Every day we say, Neshama shenasata b'tahirihi, ata barasa ata yitzata, ata nefachta b'vata meshamra b'kirbi. We say, V'haftas Hashem l'kecha b'chol avavcha, b'chol nafshcha, b'chol meidecha. But if you're really working, and it's not just technical terms and mechanics, it's all relative. Today's b'chol levavcha, b'chol nafshecha, and b'chol meidecha. Tomorrow, b'chol meidecha could become b'chol levavcha. So yesterday's makif could become today's panimi. Actually, in Lakutei Teira V'Eschanan, he talks about v'yadaita ayem. He speaks about that. That what is today faith, tomorrow can become knowledge. You can become understand it, and then faith is a higher level, and that's really the process of growth in intelligence. When someone who says they're 5 years old, they say I don't know. It's not the same like an 80-year-old scholar that says I don't know, because this one I don't know is the beginning of knowledge, and that I don't know is coming after much knowledge. So it's all relative to where you are. That's what he's essentially saying here. To continue, it says in Eitz Chaim, why is Bina called who? So he says in Eitz Chaim, not because of a concealed state, because Abba is Nela Mimena, v'nikra Atoh. So he's explaining a little deeper why it's called a who, because the fact is, it's not just because it's concealed, because Chochma, which is more concealed than Bina, is called Atoh. And also Arich and Chochma, which is higher than Chochma, is called who. El Mishum de Hu La'elam B'Keser. Because who is always relates to Keser. And Ima, compared to Zah, is like Keser L'Zah. And Arich and Chochma is like Keser to Abba V'Ima, to Chochma and Bina. So basically, it's because it's relative to the levels beyond it, not just because whether it's objectively concealed or revealed. It's all relative to the levels of which we're discussing it. The Hainu Kanal, the Mitzad Atzmis, Shemateya, V'hamayla Harikivan, the Abba Nelam Yesem Ima. If we were talking pure description of a level, because Abba Chochma is more concealed than Ima, than Bina, than the mother, you should call Chochma who, and we don't call it who, we call it Atoh. Why? Because who is always associated with a keser, with a makif. Because keser is save of a makif, it's removed, it's transcendent. Maloshan Kisrei es Binyamin. That's why Kesser is always called who. So for Eina Shayach, we can't Eina Shayach Likre who, Rak Lebchina Shu Save of a Makif. So when you say who, Nister, you're always talking about a transcendent level that's removed. Like Kodesh, like we said. And since Bina is Kesser Lazar, that's why it's called who. And Chochma, even though in relation to Bina it's more concealed, but it's not called a Kesser. It's higher than being a Kesser Lazah. So it's called Atoh in contrast to the who that's higher than it, which is Arich Chochma and Kesser. Yeah. In the parenthesis he adds that Bina is like Makif HaKorev. It's a Makif that's closer to Zah, and that's the who, and Chochma is completely removed, so it's Moker Arochik, you don't call it even who, you only relate it to what is higher than it, and then it's called Atoh compared to who of Kesser of Arich Chochma. Okay. That's why Lo Nikruhu. Good. So interestingly, basically when you say who, you're saying two things. One, it's concealed, but it still relates to the level below it. If it's completely removed, then you don't call it who either, which we learned also earlier. So Chochma, even though Chochma is higher than Bina, but it's so removed from the Mides, you don't call it who. Then you talk about Chochma in the context of what's higher than Chochma. And that's why it says, he brings that Arich Chochma is called who, but higher than Arich and Chochma is Atik, Radla. And that, it's very concealed, it's Makiv L'Makiv, you don't even call it who. Because even when you say him, the Lashon Nister, you're still talking about a level that you can relate to. It's just not in front of you. It's not present. Just as Ulegabe L'mayla Matzilis, Ein Shaykh L'Krei Chochma Hu Kim Atoh. So compared to which is higher than Atzilus, you can't call Chochma Hu, you call it Atoh. Ki Legabe L'mayla Mizun HaChochma Nikra Gilui. Because when you're talking higher than Zun, Bina is concealed compared to Zun. But Chochma is a Gilui compared to that which is higher than it. V'kesa Nikra Hu B'chinas Helam V'hainu B'chinas Kodesh. So there you have, as he says, we talked about 3 levels of Kudsha, Brich, and Shechina. First is Zah and Malchus, then Bina and Zah, or Bina and the Midas, I should say, and there's Gimel Tachtenis, and now Keser and Chochma. Now, any questions before I continue? So you do have a summary now of this past page. Instead of me reading every word, I gave everything with that he says here, we did cover. I just didn't learn it line by line. And again, if you want to learn it line by line, I did that. We have that all in the recordings. Now he's going to go higher and explain Kudsha, Brich, and Shechina even higher than in Keser itself. There's also Kudsha, Brich, and Shechina. Because right now, Kodesh is Keser. So now he's going to say in Keser, Omnom, Gam beKeser, also in Keser, Hine Arich Ampin, Hu B'chinas Shechina. Again, relatively speaking, in Keser itself, Arich Ampin is not the highest level. It's called Shechina. Shari Hu Sheira Shemokar Atzilus. So just like Malchus is the root of Biyah, Arich is the root of Atzilus. So in that context, compared to higher, so Arich is an element of Shechina. In relation to Atzilus, Arich is who, like Kudsha, Brich, Kodesh. But compared to Atzilus, it's a level, but compared to higher than in Keser itself, compared to higher than Arich Ampin is like Shechina. And that's what he goes on to explain now, the next section. So let's sum up what he says here. It says, Va'inyan hu. Yeah, remember when we learned this the first time, it was a little dense here. But as I said, I'll sum it up, so it should be relatively easier to understand. Just a moment, please. Okay. Just want to add one more thing. You may recall when we learned about Hamayrik Be'echad, when someone extends the contemplation on the unity of existence with the divine, he spoke many, many levels. That's the Mayrich Be'echad. Chol Kavanose. And he climbed, literally, existence as it's rooted in the letters of the 10 Maimoris, the 10 statements God used to create the world. Those letters of speech are rooted in thought. Thought is rooted in the faculties. He spoke about Chitzenius Bina, Pnimius Bina, Chochma, then went all the way to Keser, the Koiches Nalomim, Etzem HaNefesh. Then he went before the Tzimtzum even, where God envisions existence. And then beyond, before Elei Sarotzen, all the way to the highest levels. Shmoya Atzmi, Helema Atzmi. So reading this now, the second time that we're learning it, I feel that he's essentially spelling it out in different language, but the same idea. By explaining to us Kudsha, Brich, V'Shechinta on all these levels, the Rebbe Rashab is giving us language, not just language. He's giving us so-called guidance, how to climb the ladder and retrace our steps when we connect our lives to godliness. So Shechina relates to us. Kudsha, Brich is a step beyond that. But you want to keep on growing. It's not one thing. You want to go from all the way the lowest levels of Asiya to Malchus, from Malchus to Zah, from Zah to Bina, from Bina to Chochma, from Chochma to Keser, to Arich and Chochma, all the way to the deeper levels of Keser, all the way to before the Tzimtzum. So that's why my sense is, that's why he's elaborating so much on this, because he's giving us the same idea of, remember, Yichud Kudsha Brich V'Shchunta, Hashem Echad, HaMayrich Be'echad. So this is all part of the contemplation of Echad, being Miyachid, Kudsha Brich and Shchinta on all the levels, which is what the Aveda consists of. And of course, it enriches the whole Ayin Beis theme and experience of interface between existence and the divine, or between the divine as a manifest in existence, Shechina, with the divine that's beyond existence. I think that's a very critical piece to really understand the context of why this elaboration, because I was wondering, why is he going in so many details here? And I think that's it. It's all part of the Mayrich Be'echad that he spoke about earlier in this process. Yeah, I feel strongly about that. Good. So now he's going in Keser itself. He's going to explain how Arich and Chochma, relatively speaking, is a mocker for Atzilus, and therefore you can associate Shechina now to Arich and Chochma. Again, the Maimer Basel Legani Tavshin Yud Aleph, the Rebbe does literally the same thing. He goes from Shechina to lower levels all the way to the Kav, all the way before the Tzimtzum even. Okay, so let me sum up. Let me see here how far we can go here. Well, let me stop. If anybody has any questions before I continue.
When one is Mayrich Be'echad, what does it mean practically to go through the levels in your mind?
Well, I would just read literally from page 1421 and then 1423, he literally gives us a blueprint of what the contemplation consists of. So I would just go back, that's what we learned there. How a person looks at the world, and from that extrapolates and comes to understand the energy that sustains the world, which is divine energy, and then continues to climb. Where does that divine energy originate from? And he literally spelled out at length, actually, quite at length. If you go back, especially on page 1417, he gave the whole explanation of how human beings function, how our words originate in our thoughts, and our thoughts originate in our faculties, and our faculties originate. We spoke about shame. What is a shame? Remember, Shema is the word shame. You're talking about the Shmei, Hayu Hu Shmei Bilvad, Mayrich Be'echad, Hashem Echad, or Shmei Echad. So on page 1417, he began a whole discussion. Why is it called shame? Shame is letters. If you remember, he talked about how letters evolve one level to the next. All that is the basis of a true contemplation and meditation that we can climb, go from step to step. I'm not going to go over it now because we learned it. Just telling you where it is. Just read it again, you'll see. He literally tells you what to contemplate on. It's as clear as you'll ever find anywhere in Chassidus of what the contemplation consists of. If anybody wants to actualize it, I would just make a suggestion. Go back to page 1417, take a piece of paper, and write down in simple English or whatever language speaks to you what the steps are. But he lays it out here, what the steps are, and then try it. Next time you say Shema and Echad, but depending on how much time you have and concentration, use these steps, and you'll see, you'll experience this type of elevation of consciousness where we move from our existence, starting to connect it to the divine energy, and even said furthermore, that when you connect it all the way to the highest level, that highest is united with the lowest level as the divine manifests within existence. So Kudsha, Brich, and Shechina are basically there's two levels. One, Shechina as it relates, manifests, and Kudsha Brich as it's beyond. And that is always part of the contemplation because existence is not God. Existence was created by God. So you want to have the God that relates to existence, the godliness that relates to existence, like you said, Atoh. And then you want to be able to say, okay, and that now leads me to appreciate the divine that's beyond existence. Like I've spoken a number of times, from the art, you can understand the artist. But then you come to understand that God is not merely an artist. An artist is only one aspect of him. So Kudsha Brich is much more than just the artist, the art that he created. And he keeps on going, at least, if I recall, at least 7, 8 levels probably. Now, I'm not suggesting everyone can contemplate on all those levels every day you say Shema, but start step by step. Even if you contemplate on one level, you're already getting places. And remember, we live in a fragmented universe, a divisive universe, a world that on its own, without contemplation, it's a bunch of fragments, a very diverse universe. And Hashem Echad, like we learned, Echad means Aleph, Ches Daled, that you're bringing the Achdus, the unity of Alufei Shalelam, the Aleph, into the Ches, which is space and time. The Ches is the 7 heavens and earth. The Daled are the four directions. And then Baruch Shem Kved Malchus Leilam Vod is time. And as we're going to be learning now about Olam Shana Nefesh, it's bringing the divine unity that despite the fact that time and space are so separate, that they're really all part of a singularity of the divine unity. So that's what I would suggest doing. You want to have the real experience, I would go back and write for yourself what the steps of the contemplation include.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to stop here, where we still have to now understand why Arich and Chochma in Kesser itself is called Shechina, because it is the source of Atzilus. And higher than Arich and Chochma will be Kudsha Brich, as we shall learn. And he's going to go all the way, if I recall correctly, all the way before the Tzimtzum. So he's taking us all the way back to the source. Yeah. And then he's going to conclude that all this mitzvahs is the Yachid, Kudsha Brich v'Shechinte, and so Krishma, that's why Krishma is going to be 248 words, correspond to the 248 limbs, divine limbs or divine organs, like the mitzvahs that are 248 positive mitzvahs. That's where we're headed with all of this. Are there any other questions? No, we'll stop here. Beginning of the paragraph on page 1437. I'm doing a summary of it all.